Dictators and other sociopaths have one big vulnerability. It is connected with their ego, with their confidence that no consequences will follow their actions, which will be critical for them. They all were burned by this. This is, in principle, the main vulnerability of dictators. Hussein, Gaddafi, Hitler, Stalin, who thought that he had played Hitler again, were burned by this. It doesn't mean that Hitler will attack him and so on. The thing is, this is how the paradigm the dictator establishes. He suppresses any difference, surrounding himself with loyal people. That's why no one can or doesn't dare pay attention to the fact that something is going wrong. No one can tell him that his actions have any negative consequences, and they can end up very crying. As a result, this dictator is in his own information zone, getting information effectively from himself. The same thing happened with Vladimir Putin. Why was he confident that once he entered Ukraine, Russian troops would only see nothing but loitering around? Because he watched his TV and listened to his officials. And you know who led what the TV says and what the officials say? Vladimir Putin himself. This is creating your picture of the world, extrapolating it to sources that you consider independent of you. They confirm your picture of the world and form such a closed system. It is it that destroys, because many dictators had a huge number of resources, a huge number of opportunities, but still about the same end. That's exactly why. Because not receiving adequate information and not evaluating it healthy, you do not see vulnerabilities, you do not see risks, you do not understand what consequences will have on your actions. Of course, sometimes this can last longer, sometimes it can last longer. The worst case is when one dictator meets another, the same similar, not obligatory dictator, but someone with the same downsides. This situation is currently taking place between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. These two people roughly share the same understanding of this world, and because of that, they share a different understanding. Because the world of Vladimir Putin circles around Vladimir Putin, and the world of Donald Trump circles around Donald Trump, but both take similar steps. That is, full garbage from external information, the inability of any opinion which does not correspond to their opinion, and the environment of themselves are ultra-loyal, but quite stupid people. Because a smart person will not perform the things that, according to his view, according to his analysis, can lead to monstrous consequences. It's because of that that this endless dance between Putin and Donald Trump ends up not right, moving on to new, increasingly similar circles. But who prevails in this opposition and how it will end in the end, let's try to discuss today. I have a certain bet on what the next events will look like soon. What is basically happening, and let's initially specify the goals of each of these two sides. We'll only be considering these two sides today, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin's goal is to capture Ukraine. There are many diversifications as to why he is waging this war and what his final goal is, whether he will later attack other countries. But let's leave it for the time being, because all these questions have an answer related to what will happen, at least if we talk about the future. Yes, that is, if Vladimir Putin manages to capture Ukraine, and depending on the price it costs, it can directly affect whether he will try to capture something else and so on. At the moment, his goal is clear, to capture Ukraine. What does capturing Ukraine mean? This is not necessary about the physical capture of all Ukraine's territory. The goal is different. The goal is to ensure that Ukraine does not present itself as an independent education and that Russia has control over it. And it doesn't matter how exactly this control is going to happen, whether it will be with establishments in Kiev or the restrictions that Ukraine, fearing another war and another attack, will not do the things that Russia would not want it to do. This is Vladimir Putin's basic goal. When they talk about the SVO goals, you can hear a lot of all the nonsense. The ones that are said to be official are constantly changing. The ones that are hinted at by different analysts are also different, but the basic goal of Vladimir Putin is to make Ukraine as an independent actor not exist. In fact, Vladimir Putin has been doing everything that is connected to this goal since 2014 and continues to do so until now. This is his goal. What role does Donald Trump play in this goal? Well, this role is directly connected with the United States, which Vladimir Putin sometimes sees as the root of evil, sometimes does not see as the root of evil. This is a good question at all. Have Putin buried himself in his conspirologic representation of this world? Because at some point he had already reached the gold of the billion, but it hasn't reached the territory yet. This is a good question, an answer to which there is no. I think the answer is depends on the situation. Sometimes it really seems to him that the Anglo-Saxons and America and all that, they only sleep and see how Russia destroys. In the end, he consumes a huge number of his propaganda, thinking that this is not his propaganda, but some third or fourth opinion. During the COVID, for example, they say that he communicated with relatives a lot, of which there were not very many, in the sense that he allowed few people to himself, because he was very afraid to get infected and die. And in particular, people got there with a very specific idea of how this world is built. This could also affect it then, and now other circumstances can affect it. In any case, what is objective and what Vladimir Putin understands is that the United States is the first economy and the first military power of the world. This means that they are the main threat to his plan, and it is the threat that is that with its support, the United States is helping Ukraine and thereby stopping the Russian offensive, the war, as you want to call it. Moreover, the United States has other supporters who can hit on the economy of Russia, on the policy of Russia, yes, because many people inside the Russian elite, they are including, focus on the United States. No, it's not that there are state depots and everything else, it's just that the states that for many Russian elites represent the Western world themselves, which is not quite right in my opinion, but in their representation it is so, and it is considered to be native to some that are called liberal circles. They represent the United States as the Western world. They want to be integrated into this system. They are Western people. They want to consume Western goods. They want apartments in the West. They want to go to the West. So for them this is quite important. So if the United States creates a system of stimuli within which these people can return to the Western world, and while on the other hand they will see the outputless path that Vladimir Putin chose, then everything can happen, as it is called. I draw all this with wide brains, everything that we have observed over the past 3.5 years. Therefore, the United States is one of the main threats to Vladimir Putin and his plans to capture Ukraine. Again, not necessarily physically, but at least for control of Ukraine and its actions. In fact, in the first years of war, these concerns were quite justified because the United States supplied weapons, and Ukraine was the main donors of weapons and financial funds for Ukraine. Not on 350 billion, as Trump says, but still quite large scale. And of course, this was a big problem for Vladimir Putin, and he was afraid that it could increase, and regular support, even at the level on which support from the United States was, makes it impossible for the Russian army to capture enough number of territories of Ukraine in order for Ukraine to surrender. And Vladimir Putin believed that without this stem everything would collapse quite quickly. Because in his representation, and this is important, the West is exactly the United States, and without the United States there are no European countries. He does not perceive Europe as of itself, although in reality it is quite small, but at least as of the United States as the author, who can seriously influence its plans. Therefore, in the representation of Vladimir Putin with the arrival of Donald Trump, two things should have happened. The first thing is to stop the support of Ukraine from the United States, completely stopping the support, including not only weapons, but also intelligence and the same Starlink, not talking about the lack of pressure on Russia and the possible withdrawal of sanctions. Vladimir Putin had all the reasons to think that the arrival of Trump would be marked by this. That is, the arrival of Donald Trump will lead to the scenario he wants. Why did he have all the reasons to think that way? Because this is what Donald Trump announced. This is what was the mainstream among his supporters. This is what was the mainstream among the people he surrounded himself with. Well, that is, with the same Elon Musk, with Bannon, or with many other people. Bannon, sorry, and in this sense, Vladimir Putin had all the absolute basis to believe that Trump would become a real rescue for him. Not because Trump will help him or will call for an end to the war on the line of contact, but because Trump will completely destroy the support of Ukraine with the United States. The second thing Vladimir Putin expected was that Donald Trump would destroy Europe's support. He will destroy the connection between Europe and the United States. He will destroy NATO, because this is what Trump announced. This is what various reports wrote about what Trump is planning to do, and therefore, to consider Vladimir Putin as such was also all the basis. That is, the victory of Vladimir Putin in the communication of Putin and Trump would be if Trump did everything he promised before the elections. That is, to reduce the support of Ukraine to zero, or maybe to go to minus, removing sanctions on Russia, and on the other hand, to stop its interaction with Europe, to leave NATO, thereby opening many of Europe's countries for potential attacks from Vladimir Putin. This did not happen. It did not happen for the reason that Donald Trump, and here we are getting close to him, is also a sociopath with dictatorial inclinations. And what does this mean? It means that the whole world is moving around it in its representation. That's why it's unstable. It doesn't have a clear position of consistent nature. It's random. It's chaotic. Moreover, it doesn't like studying some information in advance. It doesn't like infiltrating it. It acts by impulses. It acts as if the moment seems right to it. And what is important, and what Putin took too little into, in my opinion, is that Trump has already shown that words he says don't matter. It works in both directions. On one hand, it means that United States allies cannot rely on Trump, and on the other, it means that United States and the West together, including Ukraine, cannot rely on Trump. And this Trump-Schrödinger became a box of surprises for everyone. The worst-case scenario, which, in principle, seemed quite possible to me, did not happen. Donald Trump did not completely give up on supporting Ukraine. America continues intelligence support for Ukraine. Moreover, now, yes, America does not hand over finance and weapons to Ukraine, but sells them for the money of European countries, which, in principle, is acceptable if we are talking about the fact that Europe can allow itself this. With Europe, it's interesting because it can allow itself a lot. Europe is very rich. If we take the European Union as a whole, it's one of the most strong economic actors in the world. The other thing is how ready Europe is to refuse its well-being in order to fight its social threat, and whether it understands that this threat really exists. In recent months, and I would even say years, we see that this understanding comes to more and more Europeans, including politicians. Politicians who were neither fish nor meat and who weren't decisive or appropriate for a crisis have been affected. The most striking example is probably Schultz and Merz, because Schultz is one of the most teardrop politicians, if you may say so. Again, let's not underestimate the role of Germany. It has done quite a bit during Schultz's time for Ukraine, but its indecency, misunderstanding, and flailing have led to the fact that not much has been done or is done. For example, the situation is different, and not only in Germany itself, but in many other European countries, because other people are coming after the leaders, and in fact, one of the leaders of Europe has undoubtedly become Merz. Looking at the superiority of which, at the cold mind of which, and at the adequate perception of which, other countries of Europe have also begun to realize the danger and, in fact, join in increasing their budgets in support for Ukraine, including the purchase of American weapons. And this does not only Europe, but, in principle, the countries of the conditional collective West. I don't like the phrase collective West because it practically means nothing and is more of a propaganda Russian narrative. But nevertheless, when we talk about the collective West, we mean countries where democracy is a value and where dictatorship is a threat. These countries could include Canada, Austria, and many, many, many other countries. As a result, we get the following. On one hand, Donald Trump did not achieve what Vladimir Putin had hoped for. This also concerns interaction with Europe, because Europeans were able to quickly find the keys to Trump and bring him to the point that Europe is his friend. If you remember, when Trump only started his second term, he said that the European Union had been designed to harm the United States. It was some kind of outraged absolute rhetoric. Moreover, he almost directly threatened that the United States would not fulfill its commitment to NATO agreements. But quite quickly, and it must be said that the claims of some Trump were fair, because he told the Europeans that why they are spending so little on defense. It's about your life, not the lives of the United States citizens. Russia has far to go for them. Europeans listened and mixed it with the Trump name Papichka, like in the NATO agency. And in the end, Trump and Europe are now in quite good relations. Yes, of course, there are different points of view on different problems, but the basic thing is trade agreements that were concluded, and the commitment of Donald Trump that America will fulfill its commitment to NATO. Is this what can be expected exactly? More likely not, but nevertheless, the trend is positive. Let's say we are careful. But now we come to the most important thing, to what concerns. After we understood that Vladimir Putin's maximum plan did not work, we now move on to their interaction right here and now. That is, why did Vladimir Putin become sure that Trump will not do anything to him? Why is Trump suffering from this? Can this change? And what will we see next? We will talk about all this right now, and I just remind you that you can support this video with your like, comments, and subscription to the channel. All these actions help promote it. You can also support the channel financially. You can do this on Patreon, the link is in the description, and buy. Buying NVPN, here it is. Here it is. This is a tool to bypass blockages that will allow you to watch YouTube without any delays, use Twitter, Instagram, call Telegram, and WhatsApp in general, do everything you want on the internet. Not what Vladimir Putin allowed you. You can buy NVPN by the link in the description, and by buying it, you support the release of new videos. In Russia, it is still not forbidden to buy or use VPNs, so the link is in the description. Buy NVPN. Well, we continue. So what situation we have here and now? We will discuss the story of how this all happened and the meeting of Trump and Zelensky, on which they fought, on which they reconciled, and so on. You know all this well. I don't think that people are watching me who just got out of the cave today and missed everything that happened. The most important moment that happened, it happened somewhere 2 to 2.5 months ago, where Trump slowly began to change his attitude to Vladimir Putin. But in order for him to understand what it means to start changing his attitude, it is necessary to understand what kind of attitude he had for Vladimir Putin. As we remember, according to my assessment, Trump is a sociopath and a person who is trying to go into dictatorship. He thinks and wants this world to be controlled by him, while he sees partners with whom he can control this world. They include Vladimir Putin on their lists. Donald Trump does not get deep into things. Ukraine does not matter to him. He doesn't know what it is, who it is, where it is. He doesn't understand the problem that Russia is applying for Ukraine. He doesn't care about that at all. He just wants one thing: for him and Vladimir Putin to quickly start sharing the world as with everyone else. Divide the world, not just like in Hitler with Stalin, but a little in a different sense. The sphere of influence, but not military, and even possibly not political, but rather economic and within the framework of global processes. Well, that is, Trump is more and more seeing the threat of China, although he would like to cooperate rather than be in the fight. But at the same time, he sees that Russia is perhaps an ally of the United States in fighting China, and in principle, in order to spread its Trump, not the United States, but it's Trump interests all over the world. That's why Trump treats Putin as the person he would like to work with, do a lot of cool things with, be friends with, play maybe even golf, do more than that. But here's the problem. According to Trump, Putin is busy with some nonsense. Naturally, Trump believes that Putin is doing some awesome. He wants to make peace, while Putin fights for some roots from the ground that don't matter how. Some forested people, losing people, ruining the economy. What the hell does Putin need that for? And in fact, Trump has now assumed to a minor degree that he can help Vladimir Putin, but not in the way that Putin would want, because Putin is obstacles to capturing Ukraine, but in his own way, in Trump's own way, that is, to help him get out of this conflict and do what is called normal things, the things of big boys. And in fact, Trump has tried to do this more than once, not out of love for Ukraine, not out of a desire to stop the war, but because he really wants to interact with Putin. He sees a potential ally in him. And Trump was always surprised that Putin didn't understand this. He was surprised that Putin didn't understand that Russia has problems with the economy, that Russia has problems on the battlefield where nothing is achieved. And Trump didn't understand how it works. Why? That's why he tries to talk to Putin once at a time, tries to contact Putin once at a time. But at some point, about 2 to 3 months ago, Trump came to the understanding that, okay, Putin has his own secret, and even said this. Putin has lost his mind, and every time we talk to him, it doesn't give any result, and then it goes wrong. And Trump chose another wheel. Trump chose the pressure on Russia. Here it's important to understand that when we talk about pressure on Russia from Trump, or any kind of pressure from Trump, it's almost never action. These are almost always words, because Trump believes that the whole world is spinning around him. He's the most cool guy, which means his cool word will do more than any real actions. That's why real actions, when Trump starts acting, look like chaos. He doesn't understand what he is doing to the people around him. People don't understand what he is doing, don't understand what they are doing. And almost every time Trump makes some actions, it goes the wrong way as he had expected. Sometimes this is positive for us. For example, how his tariff war has led to oil price falling. Thank you for calling, but it wasn't intended this way, it's an accident. On the contrary, his pressure on India has led to India moving away from the US and moving toward China. True, sources claim that Trump demanded that Modi move him to the Nobel Peace Prize, and here Modi got carried away. Him, who knows him? In any case, Trump doesn't work with real actions. His actions work the way he thinks, with words, and he doesn't understand what to do when his words don't work. That's why he started pressuring Russia with words. He started speaking much more categorically about Putin. He started speaking more offensively about Putin and the Russian army. And he threatened. He posted ultimatums. Trump loves posting ultimatums because he saw that cool guys were posting ultimatums, and as a result of those ultimatums, something happened. Nevertheless, nothing happened to Russia. According to Trump's plan, he doesn't have a backup plan. He only has the main one. He threatens Russia. Russia goes to reach an agreement with him, and he goes to reach an agreement about something. But as you remember, in the world of Vladimir Putin, everything circles Vladimir Putin. So, yes, he goes to reach an agreement with Trump, but none of these agreements lead to anything. And in fact, Vladimir Putin himself denies them. That's exactly why Trump, not that they pressurized him, I don't want to protect Trump, and in that sense I believe no one is worse than Trump at the post of President of the Union. Even despite the fact that there were many different, in my opinion, smart and honest people at the post of President of the United States. But Trump's problem is his complete incompetence, and the fact that he has formed an incompetent team around himself. This separates Trump from him in the first place, when he was surrounded by professionals after some amount of cutting off. In any case, Trump doesn't press Russia with anger, he tries to understand what he should do. That's why you see a bunch of constant insiders. The US considers sending an HVK to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire. The US considers Bangladesh. The US considers these sanctions. The US considers these sanctions. When you read that the US is considering something, it means literally that different people are coming to Trump, offering him different options. He says everything, let's think about it, because he doesn't understand what these options mean, if they will achieve any effects, and so on. A very important moment happened, the trip from Steve Witkoff to Moscow on the eve of Trump's ultimatum. Steve Witkoff heard some words wrong, and in my view, heard some words correctly, but decided to present them incorrectly, in order to simulate some progress. Trump seized for it. Why did Trump seize for it? Because Trump has no other plan. Trump hoped, here it is, I found it, it will happen now. Putin promised Steve Witkoff everything, and now we'll meet with Putin, he will promise me, and we will do all of this. But then, after a while, when Trump started talking to Putin, he suddenly realized something. Putin doesn't agree to anything, says he's not ready to move. Sources reported as Trump said, okay, either you move now or I'm leaving these talks. But then, Putin moved towards something. What exactly, we don't know. But it seems like something similar to Witkoff's later version when it was about Ukraine leaving Donbass, which means Russia will stop the offensive in other directions. Trump saw some change in that and stuck with it. He thought so, but I don't think so. I think he did it on purpose. He thought that if he managed to push Putin a bit, it would make it easier for him to push further, so he announced his triple meeting, Trump, Putin, Zelensky. Then he claimed he agreed to a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Russia did not respond at first because it was still terrified of Trump's previous ultimatum and assumed he could start for real. However, time passed, and Trump continued to insist on a meeting while Russia naturally refused. New people started claiming there would be no meeting. First it was Shakov, then it was Lavrov, then Trump was directly asked and they said, Lavrov says there will be no meeting, and Trump replied, this is all nonsense, don't pay attention to this, everything will happen. And then Putin himself claims there will be no meeting and that he wants no negotiations at all. So what happened here? Two things happened here. First, it's time to make some decisions. Either act on Trump's terms or refuse to act on Trump's terms. Time has passed and Trump showing he doesn't pay attention to what Lavrov and Ushakov are saying, or at least pretends not to, hasn't leave any other options. This is what Vladimir Putin himself should say, or else it would be treated as Russia agree, something needs to be done. He needs to speak for himself. Another thing happened later. Vladimir Putin went to China. There he spoke with Zelensky, spoke with Modi, everyone smiled at him. And here comes another deceit that Putin himself has set in. Well, in other words, Vladimir Putin seems to have had a good trip. I think he sincerely believes it. I think he sincerely believes he had an agreement with Zelensky on the basis of Syria too, though he didn't reach an agreement with him about a single pointless memorandum. I think he seems to have made quite a few. You probably met many people in their lives who are confident in their independence, who you discuss something with, say, on the eve of a meeting. I'll Handle everything, I'll reach an agreement, I'll resolve everything, everything will be fine. And these people really believe in that. And the problem is, they see the situation completely wrong, and it seems to them that they have achieved what they have absolutely failed at. If we look at the actual consequences of Putin's trip to China, nothing good has happened. No country has supported Russia. No new jokes have appeared, at least significantly. And Vladimir Putin, I think, does not understand this. He seems to have achieved success because he was bowed to, he was told that he was cool, he was talked to, but as a result, Vladimir Putin, what is called, is tired of it. Vladimir Putin thought that Trump was now in a vulnerable position, and in fact, now Vladimir Putin is confident that Donald Trump is not strong. He will not do anything. He, Vladimir Putin, will not impose any sanctions or pressure. If he does, he has friends who would agree. There's China, there's India, and moreover, the fact that they will work together influence Trump and stop him from doing anything. So the first question will be, is Putin's opinion true? I have no answer to that. I, like you, see Trump in his entire madness, a person who constantly changes his opinion, a person who holds the word, gave the word, took the word, an absolute holder of the word. So I have no answer to that question. But what did we see earlier? Earlier we saw that when Vladimir Putin was losing his mind, when Vladimir Putin is absolutely confident and that he controls the situation fully, this brings negative consequences for him. For example, the sending of him to Medinsky's talks and the rest of the nonsense made Trump believe there's no point in talking to Russia and started pressuring her, verbally threatening but still pressuring her. He scared Russia quite a bit, he scared Putin quite a bit. Now Vladimir Putin, once again fundraising, starts being rude, saying he doesn't need a meeting with Zelensky, that targeting doesn't make sense and so on. He effectively discredits all the things Trump himself has pushed. When he says the Ukrainian side wants to meet with Russia, it's not true. It's Trump who wants Russia to meet with him. That's Trump's idea, and that's what he forces him to do, and so on. So I don't know if it will influence Trump or change his rhetoric, but I do know that what Putin is doing now, the form in which he acts, greatly increases the risks for him in terms of possible pressure from the US. That is, it is impossible to understand and say what Trump will do, but it is possible to say that his motivation to do this has increased significantly after Putin's recent statements. I will not bring them here specifically. You have all heard them on WEF and in China. In fact, Trump is practically what he sees, that he is literally being pushed around, not by Lavrov with Ushakov, but by Putin personally. Trump does not like to look weak, but in order for him not to look weak, he has two tactics. One is to lie that he looks strong, and two is to try to be strong. We saw manifestations of each other. We saw US strikes on Iran and how Trump stated that in reality he is a strong leader, everyone respects him, and what the media writes is fake news. Nevertheless, if we completely delve into the field of guesses, you know my position. As it seems to me, Trump will have no other way out than to start verbally pressuring Russia, and then, if he finds leverages, pressuring Putin. And Russia physically, he has such tools, and especially, they're quite simple, by the way. For example, if the US goes back to the Black Sea, it would be very strong. When we discussed possible sanctions, I said all these tariffs on India and China were great and fun. But what actually can influence is sanctions against the Black Sea. That's why I'll closely monitor them. And Trump in his talks is now threatening Russia again when journalists ask, "What did you do?" And he says, "We haven't even started." And guess who said the same? We'll start more, we have the second stage, we have the third stage, and in fact, there will be a hell of a spread for those who will be prevented from the war ending. In serious words, no one likes it anymore. Trump has lost his loyalty, lost his trust. His words, nevertheless, what Trump hasn't lost is the desire to seem cool, this desire to look cool. And it consists of two factors if we talk in the context of pressure on Russia. First, it must know that it won't have negative consequences for it. Second, it must know that people will approve of it. And honestly, this is the situation where almost the only thing it can do to satisfy both conditions, to start pressuring Russia. This is what the Europeans are waiting for, their own electorate, most of which is for Trump to be tough. His own comrades, neoconservators, and much more, especially considering the 2026 elections in midterms where Republicans could lose one of the parliamentary branches. This doesn't quite fit Trump's plans, I think. That's why I don't think Trump has many options. Maybe he sees it differently. I can't think of anything. For that, he needs to fight long for about 5 years, probably. But nevertheless, it seems to me that the factors we're talking about place pressure on Trump. That's why Trump's rhetoric, if you noticed, has been a bit harsher in Russia's relations in the past week than it has been in Ukraine's relations, and it would stop being as harsh as it had been. Initially, after the Alaska negotiations with Vladimir Putin, what will happen in the end, time will tell. But it seems to me that Vladimir Putin is making a mistake again, and it is the same person who has already made it multiple times. You say, but these mistakes are not worth it yet because they are still with the authorities. But this is a discussed question. In the sense that it is with the authorities, it is, of course, with the authorities. But in my opinion, all these mistakes led to the fact that Vladimir Putin, for 3.5 years in the war, who did not achieve anything from what he would want, lost a huge number of people, lost a huge number of equipment, lost international influence, lost Azerbaijan, lost Armenia, lost Syria, got Finland and Sweden to NATO, and got a lot of things from the negative for himself. But sanctions are inevitable when you're a dictator or a sociopath. Does it mean Putin won't do it tomorrow? No, it doesn't. Does it mean sanctions will be introduced tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or in the near future? Quite a bit. But in any case, we'll see. We are in a world that, unfortunately, is now being controlled by dictators and sociopaths who try to be like them. For example, in the United States, they are Trump, who wants to be a dictator. China is his dictator. Also, Putin isn't exclusively influential, he is self-reliant. But as a hero stratus create many problems in the world, he is also inevitably a dictator. So any rational or logical analysis of what's happening is hardly possible. We aren't thinking about how it should be, we're moving into what the actors can think and where they come from based on their previous actions. Today, this is more of an opinion column. And I think it's important to just show this dynamic between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Not to understand what will happen next, this is nonsense, but to better understand what it's based on and not to keep swinging on these shackles. Today Trump is ours, tomorrow he is. Trump is no one, just like Putin, he is no one. He is on his own. And generally their actions fit the prototypes that we watch in front of us. Sorry for the word props, this is a pseudo-expert's word, so let's put it differently. It fits the representation, at least of mine, that I managed to make up. And that's why it shouldn't tremble so much. The worst has not happened anymore. What Vladimir Putin expected from Donald Trump has not happened anymore. Is that good? Well, not at all, because if a normal president of the United States were here, the situation would be completely different. Ukraine's support would be higher, pressure on Russia would be much higher, and the end of the war would be much closer. But we have what we have, so understanding what's happening, let's stop thinking about what we can all do rather than thinking about what mood Trump will be in tomorrow. But basically, I think the possibility that he will wake up in the right mood in the foreseeable future is quite high. We'll see. Maybe it will be another point in the sky, as I said, that, for example, Trump will not win the elections, and unfortunately he did. See you soon, all the best, bye.